Welcome back to this week's episode of Lindsey, Byrd, and Writing is Hard. Today's episode is a little different and a little special. Our topic today is all about scams in the literary world. What are the most common scams that take place? Who are the most likely people to be affected? What can you look out for? And what can you do if you're a victim of a scam? All of that and more. I hope you enjoy. Today's interview is with Victoria Strauss. Victoria is the co-founder of Writer Beware and is the author of 9 novels for adult and young adults, including her Way of Errata epic fantasy duology and a pair of historical novels for teens, Passion Blue and Color Song. She has written hundreds of books or reviews for publications such as SF Site, and her articles on writing have appeared in Writer's Digest and elsewhere. In 2006, she served as a judge for the World Fantasy Awards. In 2009, she received the SFWA Service Award for her work with Writer Beware, and in 2012 was honored with an Independent Book Blogger Award for the Writer Beware blog. Writer Beware is sponsored by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association and is designed to shine a bright light into the dark corners of the shadowy world of literary scams, schemes, and pitfalls. It provides advice for writers as well as industry news and commentary. So just to start us off today, can you tell us about how Writer Beware first came into being and what your original intention was when you created it?
Well, I was never scammed. That's something that people often ask me, although I easily could have been, because when I first started submitting my work, I really didn't know a lot about publishing. But around the turn of the century, which I know is really dating myself, I started to get actively involved with writers' groups online. And I started seeing all these horrible stories about writers who've been ripped off by fee-charging literary agents and dishonest vanity publishers. And I had no idea that anything like that even existed. And as a writer, always interested in unusual and obscure things. So I became very interested in this kind of scam underworld. Um, and around the same time, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association was looking for someone to create a page of warnings about scams. So I volunteered, and a mutual acquaintance introduced me to Ann Crispin, who was also an SFWA member and was working on putting together a writing scams committee. So we'd both been working on the same thing. Unbeknownst to either of us, we decided to join forces, and that was the beginning of Writer Beware. Um, our aim originally, maybe naively, was to kind of put ourselves out of business by providing so much knowledge and warning about scams that, writers wouldn't need us anymore. But that's very much not the case. And we are still going strong nearly 30 years later.
Has the nature of the scams changed since 2000 to 2025?
Yes, when Writer Beware first started, really the only route to publication was the traditional publishing route. You had to get an agent, the agent queried the publisher, and maybe you got published. So that's where most of the scams were focused, on literary agents who would charge fees or make editing referrals, and publishers that would charge fees and provide poor service. But with the growth of small presses, and especially the explosion of self-publishing options, that now is where most scams are focused.
With certain websites, like for instance, Query Tracker, has that helped mitigate some scam issues, or has it just offered new pathways and new opportunities for other scams to arrive?
Query Tracker is a great service, not only because of the information it provides, but because it lets people leave comments, so other writers can see the experience that people have had with specific agents. There certainly is much more information out there about scams and how to protect yourself than there used to be. Um, but they're everywhere and they do take advantage, especially of beginning writers who may not be aware that they have to be careful.
For those beginning writers, are there, for right now in 2025, are there specific scams you would say to be most mindful of?
Yes, if you self-publish, you're pretty much guaranteed to be contacted by um, dishonest publishing and marketing companies that want to poach you from whatever platform you're currently with, and get you into their system so they can subject you to all kinds of upselling pressure, sell you marketing services that you don't need and may not be very effective, sometimes just take your money and run. Sometimes perpetrate really elaborate frauds like fake publishing contract offers and fake movie adaptation offers requiring huge fees. Um, and there are also fake literary agencies that will contact authors and say, we'll represent you, but first you have to buy this probably possibly bogus service for a lot of money. Um, so direct solicitation is one of the major signs of scams these days. Any kind of out of the blue publishing or movie rights related offer is pretty likely to be a scam these days.
Would you say that any legitimate agent offer representation something that would come from direct solicitation, or is it kind of knee jerk? If you get something, it's likely a scam?
It's unlikely. I mean, you can almost never say never in this business, but reputable agents don't typically reach out to writers directly. They expect writers to come to them, not the other way around. So, the normal process is you query the agent asks for your work, maybe you get a representation offer, and then the agent submits your work. Um, and that's how it works, 99% of the time. So if you hear from someone who says they're a literary agent, um, just out of the blue, and you can't link that to a query you made, you should be extremely cautious because there's a good chance that it's not legitimate. And there are a lot of scammers now that impersonate real agents and publishers. So it'll be a name you recognize. The link at the bottom of the email will go to the real agency, but it is a scam. And the way to know that is if you're asked for money, because reputable agents don't charge upfront fees.
So I know that in some scam situations, when you're talking to a scammer, they might not be completely upfront with asking for money immediately because they're trying to just bait you along for a little while. If you're starting to have that conversation with somebody, is one potential step reaching out to the legitimate agency directly and saying, hey, I got this email. I just want to verify this is a real thing through an info or something like that? Or is there a way for the author to double check the legitimacy?
Um, Yes, reaching out to the agency is a good idea. And they are aware of these kinds of scams and of all the impersonation scams that are out there. So yeah, they can confirm, if it's not a legitimate contact. You can also contact me and let me know, if I've gotten other reports of the particular solicitation, I can let you know.
What is your process when somebody reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I think I've been scammed. Is this legitimate?"
I asked for documentation. Please, if you contact me, please forward the email you received or describe the phone call you received. And, there are certain things that always, pretty much infallibly indicate a scam, such as a demand for upfront money or the selling of fake services such as book returnability or book licensing. Um, if I'm not sure, I can do research online and see what I can find out. Um, Writer always documents complaints. I always ask for emails, contracts, other information. We don't work by hearsay. If I can't actually document whatever is being reported, I don't make it public.
Are there, for you, any particular scam that is the most difficult to figure out if it's a scam or not?
Generally speaking, demands for upfront money. That's probably the most general warning sign. And the other one, as I mentioned, is direct solicitation. That's definitely an indicator. But, there are all kinds of schemes and scams, and it's not always easy to tell.
What is the most wacky scam that you've ever come across that just stays in your mind? Is like, this one's a weird one.
Um, well, years ago, there was a literary agent who organized a conference and she took fees from attendees. And then she absconded with the money and faked her own death to sort of get out of obligation. She had her assistant, really her, send a message to attendees saying, sadly, this person has passed away. You won't be able to attend this conference. Um, she was later arrested in Canada for a similar scheme. She turned out to be wanted in the US for a variety of crimes, including attempted murder. And she had kind of, and also passing bad checks. And she had kind of run away from these charges and gone to South Carolina to become a literary agent, which is the fake conference she organized. So ultimately, she was extradited to the United States and served a jail term. But it was just this bizarre, convoluted story involving false identities and criminal actions and fake deaths. That one really sticks out.
It sounds like a plot of a book on its own.
She did actually write a memoir and attempted to send it around to publishers, but she got no takers.
I'm almost happy that she got no takers, if only for the fact that I feel like the publishing industry took care of itself on that front. Maybe somebody else can write it for her and be a little bit more fantastical. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you've also, when you're doing Writer Beware, sometimes you do work with law enforcement passing over information. What is that process like?
um, if it's difficult because it's writing scams generally kind of fly below law enforcement radar because they typically don't involve huge amounts of money. You know, like $5,000 is a lot to the individual, but to law enforcement, it's not that much money. So it's difficult to get law enforcement interested. Sometimes we do get outreach from um, officials or local police in particular who take an interest in a scam that's happening in their area. We worked with attorney general offices to share information about scams. And in the wacky case that I just mentioned, we were contacted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who had seen some of our blog posts about this bizarre fake death and canceled conference and kind of spotted the similarities and wanted to figure out if it was the same person. Um, and there was just a one of the scams we had been following from overseas with connections to the USA. The CEO and VP were just arrested in December and are being held for trial in the US. And this is a scam that the FBI estimates took upwards of $44 million from authors. It's one of the most elaborate ones that we've ever, seen. So that was a fairly high profile bust, but those are pretty rare.
Now, when you say that it was several millions of dollars, was this because of how long it had gone on and how many people had been victims of it? Or was it like a couple of people who were very wealthy happened to be victims and that's what made the amount so high?
It was a combination of the number of victims, the amount of time that it was running. It's, several years it was doing what it did. But also just how incredibly egregious a scam it was. It was called Page Turner Press and Media. It fronted as a publishing and marketing service, and it would sign authors up to get their books published or to get them marketed. And then it would pressure them to buy more and more services. Um, and then it would draw them into a fake movie scheme. It had its own fake movie studio. It charged for screenplays and film treatments. It made writers pay for production costs for these supposed movies that were being made out of their books. Of course, it was all fake and imaginary. And a number of victims lost six figures. One victim lost, I think, six or $700,000. Um, so it was a combination of a lot of victims, a long-running scam, and just the incredible elaborate scheme that it ran.
Now,
And it just did the incredible flagrant dishonesty. Um,
now I'm curious because a lot of what you've described, I assume that the difference is because one has a product and one doesn't have a product. But for authors who are trying to get published, you see a lot of vanity presses where you pay for something to be published and you pay for the marketing, you pay for the editing, you pay for everything right up front, and they're very like blunt about you're paying for it, we'll make the book. What would be the difference between doing a scam and doing a vanity press?
um, the difference is in the goal and the performance. A straightforward self-publishing service that charges a reasonable fee and delivers good quality services, that's a choice that authors can make to do something like that. Where it would shade into a scam would be if the services were substandard in some way, if they weren't delivered at all. Or if the author was pressured heavily to buy more and more and more, um, or targeted for just bogus stuff like some scams, run book order scams, where they tell the author that they've gotten an order from bookstores across the nation for thousands of copies, but the author has to pay for the printing up front. So it's so, and from the outside, if you just look at a company that's offering services on its website, the difference between a reputable company and a scam is not always immediately obvious. And that's one reason WriterBeware exists, because we're able to identify and list these companies, and writers can contact us directly to ask about a company's reputation.
How many people work on Writer Beware?
There's me, I'm sort of the face of it all. And then there are several other members who prefer not to be named because we sometimes are targets of harassment. But all in all, there are 4 people who are directly involved. And we get a lot of support from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, which is our sponsor.
Do you work with more than just science fiction, fantasy, or is that really where you get a lot of your feedback from?
No, we are designed to be used by writers in any genre or market and at any stage of their career.
How long would it take if somebody reached out to you and was like, "Hey, I think I have a scam." How long is the usual process of vetting the scam and continuing it before the answer is revealed?
Well, I have I handle most of the email, and we get a lot. So I'm usually pretty jammed up, and I have an autoresponder that tells people it can be up to a week. Usually it's sooner. I really do try and get back to people as soon as possible, but it could be a week or even more if I'm really jammed up. And I also tell people, if you don't hear from me within a week, give me a nudge.
Um, for people who are waiting to hear back, are there things that they can do or things that they should not be doing while they're in this limbo with the potential scammer?
Yeah, don't send the check. If you're not sure, if you have doubts, yeah, don't do anything further. Um, the I think the saddest emails I get are from people who have already signed up and they're starting to have doubts, and it's very hard to tell them that they're being ripped off, but you that's unfortunately the truth.
Is there anything that, say somebody has been ripped off, is there any way for them to recoup that money? Can they contact their bank, or is there anything financially they can potentially do to try to get that money back?
Yes, if you pay by credit card or PayPal, you can initiate a dispute process. There's usually a limited window for doing that, but even if you're beyond that window, banks and credit card companies are often willing to work with fraud victims. And I do hear from writers who've been able to get money back that way. Never pay by wire transfer because those are not reversible. There are also a variety of places where you can make a report if you've been scammed. The Internet Frauds and the Internet Crime Center, I think I'm blanking on the name, the Better Business Bureau. There's information on the Writer Beware blog about where to make reports.
Is there any way to eventually track down the origin of the scammer? I know we've already talked about one group that was caught, but is it usually a group of people or one individual? Is there any way to actually follow those emails back and find whoever it is on the other side?
I don't really have the resources to do anything technically sophisticated. I usually put it together with information that I receive from a variety of sources. Internet searches can tell you a lot. I also hear from people who want to kind of snitch on scams that they work for. Um, there are various methods. I often have suspicions, but can't fully connect the dots. So it can be frustrating, but and then, for publishers and so on, it's just the one company. It's not where it's difficult is where the scam is coming from overseas and doing business in the US under a different name. Then it can be very hard to trace back to the source.
Overseas scams, or people who might be living overseas and feel like they're getting scammed, are you still a resource that they can reach out and contact? Or
Yeah.
is this mainly for the United States?
We're pretty much limited to the English language market. But yeah, I mean, I hear from people from the UK, from Australia, and I hear about scams. And it- the US seems to be the biggest hub for writing scams, but there are scams in every country. So.
Have you seen any differences of the style of scams for scams that might originate from another country versus scams that originate in the United States or targeting United States citizens?
Yeah, the fake publishing companies and fake literary agencies are almost all located overseas. That seems to be where virtually all of them come from. Um, but there are classic scams, vanity publishers, questionable literary agents, those can exist anywhere. So, and once upon a few years ago, it was relatively easy to identify a scam from overseas because they are mostly staffed by people who are fluent English speakers, but not necessarily fluent English writers. So there would often be grammatical or syntax errors in the emails and websites. But with the advent of Chat GPT and other chatbots, that's no longer the case. So that was a style difference that is no longer available as a scam marker.
Now, we spent the past half hour or so discussing scams. I'd like to switch it a little bit. And what would an author or writer, anybody who's getting started, what should they be looking for a positive, like this is a proper good contact to be having with an actual person?
Um, for a literary agent,
Mm.
look for a track record of sales to reputable publishers. If the agent has a website, there should be information about clients and sales on the website. A resource like Query Tracker, which you mentioned earlier, can be a good way of researching that because they provide some of that information. If you are able to subscribe to Publishers Marketplace, that has a huge amount of information on agents' track records, so you can find out what they've sold and where. That really is the most important marker for a literary agent because it's proof of competence and performance. So look for that. If it's a publisher, um, look for quality in the books. Often a publisher will have a reputation that you can research by Googling them and seeing who their authors are and what reviews they've gotten. If it's a smaller publisher and you can't find that much information, order a book or two and see if it's professionally formatted, if there are any errors in text. And doing a web search, often will turn up complaints or questions. So always do a web search and do some research to see what you can find. Social media can be a good source for finding out about things. If you join writers groups, that could be helpful. Just research, research, research. Don't take anything at face value. Always double check.
Now, one of the situations I can think of that would not yield a lot of results, but still be potentially on the edge, is this a scam, is this not a scam, is for a new agent or a new publishing house that's just started out. So if somebody is just building their profile, they don't have a lot of authors, or maybe they don't have any authors under their name, or it's a publishing house that's just, we've decided to launch. What can an author do about, all right, this person has no back track record, but they seem like they might be interested. Should they approach that type of situation?
Look for relevant previous experience. So for an agent, they might have worked for a publisher before, or they might have trained at a reputable agency. For a publisher, whoever is running the publisher, working at the publisher, have they worked in publishing? Do they have marketing or other transferable skills? So look for relevant work background and be careful if the agent or publisher is just setting up with zero relevant experience, because you can't say for sure this person won't make it, but it may take a very long time, or they may flame out. And if you are their client signing up right at the outset, you may essentially be a guinea pig for their work experiment. So you really want to make sure that the person has the skills that they need to do the job, even if they're brand new and don't have any clients. That's a good indication of the possibility that they may be successful.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, because I feel like it's a gamble where you're like, maybe this person is going to hit it and I'm just going to be that best-selling author that's going to, bring them to, glory. But also it's the realism of, it might take a while. We might not have a lot of funds. They might not have the marketing experience, et cetera, et cetera. So figuring out where that balance is.
Yeah, you don't want to let someone experiment on you to try and build their own business. With publishers, I'd always suggest waiting to query them until they've actually been putting books out for a year or more. and have demonstrated some stability. I often hear from writers who are, they found out about a new publisher, no books published yet, maybe a few authors recruited. But it's a gamble to sign up right away for a publisher that has no track record because there's a really high failure rate for new small presses. And things can go badly wrong. So yeah, definitely wait and make sure that they can actually get books all the way through the production process.
I know you're focused on writer beware, but for the sanity of those publishing houses, if writers start saying, okay, we're not going to try these new presses, how would they be able to get a stable of authors who can help their publishing house continue?
I often see that question asked, and I don't think that it is writers' obligation to essentially be proof of concept. You know, it is a car, it is a chicken and egg kind of dilemma. Um, but I don't think writers have any obligation to help a publisher out by signing on, right out of the bat when there's absolutely no indication or proof that the publisher can actually do the job. Now, if it's a brand new publisher and the people involved all have publishing track records that you can research, it's less of a risk. But even so, you're really kind of setting yourself up as a guinea pig for someone else's experiment. And it pays to be cautious. I mean, it's a case by case evaluation, I would say. And again, research is key. You really, really need to look into the background of any publisher you're considering of submitting to, and not only to make sure that they're reputable, but to make sure that they're a good fit for your goals as an author.
When the author or writer has moved to the process, they have their agent, they're going on submission, they're starting to have that dialogue with publishers. Are there things that they should be looking at in their contracts that they should be wary of or concerned with? I mean, hopefully the agent will spot any of those types of concerns. But or is there anything that's not quite the best verbiage for an author that they should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, there are a lot of areas where contracts can be author unfriendly. For instance, a grant of rights clause should never include a copyright transfer where ownership of copyright is transferred to the publisher. Um, I mean, really too many to kind of mention briefly, but on the Writer Beware blog, there is a contracts category that includes a lot of posts about these issues.
One specific issue that I think I'll just touch base on is the idea of AI. 'Cause I know a lot of writers are terrified of their works getting scraped and eventually they'll be out of business because all their books will just be written by AI. Have you seen any concerning language appearing in either scams or in contract languages about AI?
I'm not seeing concerning language. I am seeing a growing number of contract clausing addressing AI, usually guaranteeing that the publisher will not use author's work for AI training or contract with any distributor that does so. I've also seen clauses requiring the author to guarantee that they haven't used generative AI in creating their work. So this is becoming more and more common.
It's actually really good news to hear.
Yeah, yeah, it is a good thing.
So before I let you go today, I did want to ask, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share, either on the topic of writer beware or in general?
Um, yes, I think that, when I have these conversations about writer beware and scams, it's, scam, scam, scam all the time. And it sort of sounds like there's nothing else out there. And it's just this terrible, tsunami of fraudsters and grifters that want to take advantage of authors. And while it's true that there are a lot of scams, and while it is true that writers need to be careful and knowledgeable and cautious, um, there are so many legitimate options and opportunities out there. So um, while you really need to be aware of scams, you shouldn't be overwhelmed by the fact that they're out there. If you know about them, if you know the warning signs, which is where right of aware can help, and if you are careful and do your research, you really can avoid them. I often hear from writers who are like, I'm going to give up. There's nothing out there but scammers, but it really isn't true. Um,
I have to admit, I've been following your blog and I've been following, Writer Beware for many, many years, as I've been slowly advancing my writer journey. And I never got a scam. And I had a moment the other week where I was like, I feel kind of left out. Like, no one's ever reached out to me. Like, what am I just not writerly enough to get an email from somebody trying to get, and it wasn't until my book actually got published where someone went into my DMs and was like, hi. So really, it's like it takes a moment where you have to, pass a certain threshold before they start showing up.
yes, that is true. And if you self-publish, you are absolutely guaranteed to become a target because that really is where most of them are focused these days. Um, I should say that WriterWare is threefold. We're a blog, a website, and a Facebook page. And the website is kind of a static resource. It's a general resource with information about scams and links to resources that are helpful. The blog is where we report on scam happenings and other areas of interest. And we don't just report on scams, we cover the publishing industry generally. And the Facebook page is a venue for discussion. So if you're looking at writer beware, look at all three. Some people are only aware of the blog, but um, we are a bigger resource than that.
I'll put all three in the description, so if anybody's curious, they can have it a little bit more accessible to figure out where to go. Um,
Great.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
That's it for this week's episode of Lindsey Byrd and Writing is Hard. You can find out more about Victoria Strauss and Writer Beware in the description with all of the links to the different websites. If you enjoyed this content, please do like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you more. Bye for now.